In our last lab, we experimented with reflection of light. We also defined some of the terms and procedures used in optics. In this lab, we will examine another behavior of light known as refraction. As always, before beginning any experiment in the laboratory, be sure you are familiar with laboratory safety requirements. For a demonstration of basic lab safety rules, you can watch our video entitled Lab Safety. Refraction of light is a change in direction of a light wave as it enters a different transparent medium obliquely. We can demonstrate refraction of light with a pencil in a glass of water. If we hold the pencil straight up in the glass and view it straight on, we do not see any refraction. We see the entire unbroken length of the pencil. When the pencil is slanted in the glass, light strikes the pencil obliquely, and refraction takes place. The pencil seems to be broken at the waterline, and the part of the pencil underwater seems to be leaning at a different angle than the part of the pencil above the water. The light we see reflected from the part of the pencil out of the water travels through only one medium, air. Since the light waves travel through only one medium, they travel at a constant speed until they reach our eyes and we see the pencil. The light waves reflected from the part of the pencil under the water travel through 3 different media, air, glass, and water, before they reach our eyes. When light enters the water, the waves refract. They slow down and change direction. Then, the refracted light waves reflect from the pencil and continue through the water. When the reflected waves pass from water back into air, they refract again, but this time they speed up and change direction. Since the light waves have changed direction, we see that part of the pencil from a slightly different angle. The refraction of light from the pencil is an interesting phenomenon, but refraction has some practical applications. Refraction can be used to change an image by enlarging it, diminishing it, inverting it, or bringing it into focus. These functions can be achieved by using lenses. A lens is a piece of glass or other transparent medium that refracts light to produce an image. Lenses are used in telescopes, microscopes, and magnifying glasses to enlarge images. They are used in eyeglasses to correct vision impairments, such as nearsightedness and farsightedness. Lenses are also used in cameras to bring images into focus. The 2 basic kinds of lenses are convex lenses and concave lenses. Convex and concave lenses each have 3 different types. Each type of lens is named according to the shape of its front surface, the surface into which light normally enters the lens, and the back surface, the surface from which light exits the lens. If the front surface of the lens curves outward, away from the center of the lens is convex. A convex lens that is convex on both surfaces is a double-convex lens. A convex lens with a flat surface on the back is a plano-convex lens. A convex lens with a concave surface on the back is a concave-convex lens. If the front surface of the lens curves inward toward the center of the lens is concave. A concave lens that is concave on both surfaces is a double-concave lens. A concave lens with a flat surface on the back is a plano-concave lens. A concave lens with a convex surface on the back is a convex-concave lens. To help us see how light waves reflect and refract, we can use a ray diagram. A ray diagram is a graphical representation of the possible paths that light rays may follow as they interact with a mirror or lens. Since the wavelengths of light waves are so narrow, they are shown as rays in a ray diagram. A ray diagram for a lens includes two axes, an optical axis, which passes through the center of the lens horizontally, and a vertical axis, which passes through the center of the lens vertically. The point where the two axes intersect is the vertex. Rays of light that strike an object, such as a mirror or lens, are incident rays. Rays of light that are refracted by a lens are refracted rays. Incident rays parallel to the optical axis strike a lens and refract through a point, called a focal point, on the optical axis. A focal point of a lens is a point on the optical axis where rays parallel to the optical axis meet after they refract. Each lens has two focal points, the near focal point in front of the lens and the far focal point behind the lens. The distance from the vertex to a focal point is called the focal length. A point twice the focal length from the front surface of the lens is designated 2f1. A point twice the focal length behind the lens is designated 2f2. A double-convex lens is also called a converging lens because incident rays of light parallel to the optical axis refract toward the optical axis and converge at the far focal point. We can see how a double-convex lens causes light waves to converge if we use a ray box with three parallel laser beams. The laser beams are directed into the lens. The beams converge at the far focal point. We can conduct additional experiments with a double-convex lens and an optical bench. An optical bench is a rigid, adjustable platform for the precise positioning of optical instruments, such as mirrors, lenses, and light sources for optical experiments. First, we need to determine the focal length of the lens. To do that, we need to focus a distant object on a reflective screen. The distant object is a group of trees across the parking lot from where we are. We lined up the optical bench with the window, placed the double-convex lens on the 210 centimeter mark on the bench, and set a reflective screen at the 180 centimeter mark. By pulling the screen closer to the lens, we are able to bring the outdoor scene into focus. The scene comes into sharpest focus when the screen is at the 190 centimeter mark. The difference in distance between the position of the lens and the position of the screen is 20 centimeters, so the focal length is 20 centimeters. Now that we know the focal length, we can determine the other values needed to set up a ray diagram. If the lens is placed at the 100 centimeter mark, f1 would be at the 80 centimeter mark. f2 would be at the 120 centimeter mark. 2f1 would be at the 60 centimeter mark, and 2f2 would be at the 140 centimeter mark. Let's use a ray diagram to predict how the image will appear if an object is placed 2 1/2 times the focal length in front of the lens, which puts the object at 50 centimeters. In a ray diagram, the object is often depicted by an upright arrow. The arrow is drawn on the optical axis in a position relative to the actual object, in this case, at a point beyond 2f1. To locate the image, we will draw 3 incident rays. The first incident ray is drawn from the top of the object to the center of the lens parallel to the optical axis. This ray refracts through the lens to the far focal point, f2. The second incident ray is drawn from the top of the object through the vertex. This ray continues straight through the lens. The second refracted ray does not appear to be refracted, but it is. It refracts slightly downward when it enters the lens. Then, it refracts upward when it exits the lens. Since the refraction is the same each time, the refracted ray continues in the same direction as the incident ray. The third ray is drawn from the top of the lens through the near focal point, F1, and on to the lens. The ray refracts through the lens and continues parallel to the optical axis. Notice that all three refracted rays meet at a point between F2 and 2F2 in back of the lens. This is the location of the image. The point where the three rays converge is where the top of the image will be. Since the point of convergence is below the optical axis, the image is inverted. This is the orientation of the image. An orientation can be inverted, as in this example, or it can be upright. The image drawn at the point of convergence is smaller than the object, so the image is reduced in size. A ratio of the size of an image relative to the size of the object is called magnification. In this ray diagram, the height of the image is 0.75 centimeters, and the height of the object is 1.5 centimeters, so the magnification is 1 to 2. However, since the image is inverted, the magnification is given a negative value, which makes it negative 1 to 2. Since the image appears behind the lens, we know it can be projected onto a reflective screen. This type of image is a real image. Now, let's perform this experiment on our optical bench and see if the image will appear as predicted. The lens is located at the 100 centimeter mark. We have placed the object to be refracted at the 50 centimeter mark, which is 2.5 times the focal length in front of the lens, beyond the 2F1 point. The object to be refracted is an LED light shining through a disc with a number 4 cut out of it. According to the ray diagram we saw earlier, the image should appear between F2 and 2F2 on the optical bench. For this reason, we have placed this screen a little more than halfway between F2 and 2F2 on the optical bench. If our calculations are correct, the image of the object will be projected onto the screen near this point. By slowly sliding the screen toward the lens, we can bring the image into focus. The object comes into focus when it is at the 130 centimeter mark on the bench, so its location is between F2 and 2F2. As we can see, the image orientation is inverted. To find the magnification, we need to find the width of the image and the object. The screen we are using has increments that are 2 millimeters apart. We see that the image is approximately 10 millimeters wide. The width of the object is 20 millimeters. The ratio of the size of the image to the size of the object is 1 to 2. But since the image is inverted, the magnification is negative 1 to 2. Since the image can be projected onto a reflective screen, it is a real image. Let's try another experiment with the double-convex lens. This time, we have placed the object right at 2F1 at the 60 centimeter mark on the optical bench. The lens will remain at the 100 centimeter mark. We can predict the characteristics of the image with a ray diagram. From this, we predict that the image location will be at 2F2, which is at the 140 centimeter mark on the optical bench. The image will also be inverted and the same size as the object, so its magnification will be negative 1. Since the image is behind the lens, it will be a real image. We will place the screen at the 150 centimeter mark and pull it forward until the image comes into focus. The image came into focus at 2F2 at the 140 centimeter mark, just as we predicted, and the image is inverted. The image is the same size as the object, so its magnification is -1, and the image is real. From this, we see that the image appeared just as predicted. Now let's find out what happens when we place the object between 2F1 and F1 at the 70 centimeter mark on the optical bench. According to our ray diagram, the lens should form an image that is located beyond 2F2 with an inverted orientation and a magnification of -2. The image type should be real. With the object at the 70 centimeter mark, which is between 2F1 and F1, we place the screen at the 170 centimeter mark and pull it forward until it comes into focus. The image comes into focus at the 165 centimeter mark on the optical bench, so the location is beyond 2F2. The image is also inverted and larger than the object. If we measure the width of the image, we find that it is 40 millimeters. Let's compare that to the size of the object, which we earlier established was 20 millimeters. That gives us a ratio of 2 to 1. Since the image is inverted, the magnification is -2. Since we can project the image on a screen, we know that the image is real. Now, let's turn our attention to a double-concave lens. A double-concave lens is called a diverging lens because all parallel incident rays refract away from the optical axis. They diverge. To determine the path that the diverging rays will follow, we draw a dashed line from the near focal point to the point where each incident ray intersects the vertical axis of the lens. Then, we extend a solid line to show the path that the refracted rays will follow. We can see how a double-concave lens causes light waves to diverge if we use the ray box with 3 parallel laser beams. The laser beams are directed into the lens. As we can see, the beams diverge when they are refracted. Because refracted rays diverge, they never meet to produce a real image. Instead, they produce a virtual image. A virtual image can be directly seen by an observer, but it cannot be projected onto a reflective screen. If we position a double-concave lens between an object and an observer, the observer can see an image of the object through the lens. The image appears upright and reduced in size. Notice that the image is also inverted laterally, which means it is inverted side to side. The focal length of our double-concave lens is 15 centimeters. Since we know the focal length, we can determine the other values needed to set up a ray diagram. If the lens is placed at the 100 centimeter mark, F1 would be 85 centimeters, F2 would be 115 centimeters, 2F1 would be 70 centimeters, and 2F2 would be 130 centimeters. To predict the properties of an image formed by a double-concave lens, let's look at a ray diagram with an object placed at twice the focal length in front of the lens at 2F1. The first incident ray is drawn from the top of the object parallel to the optical axis. The refracted ray diverges away from the optical axis. An extension from the refracted ray passes through the near focus at F1. The second incident ray is drawn from the top of the object to the lens. An extension of the ray passes through the far focus at F2. When the incident ray passes through the lens, it refracts parallel to the optical axis. An extension from the refracted ray is drawn back through the lens parallel to the optical axis. The third incident ray is drawn from the top of the object through the vertex. The refracted ray continues on the same path. The image will be located at the point where the third incident ray meets the two refracted ray extensions in front of the lens between f1 and the vertex. Since the lines meet above the optical axis, the image will be upright. The size of the image is smaller than the object, so the image is reduced. The ratio of the size of the image relative to the size of the object is 1:3. Since the image is upright, the magnification will be +1:3. Since the image is in front of the lens, the image type is virtual. For this experiment, we have placed the double-concave lens at the 100 centimeter mark on the optical bench. We have placed the object at the 70 centimeter mark. This is twice the focal length of the lens, so it corresponds with the 2f1 location. A concave lens will not produce a real image that can be projected on a screen. So to see the image, we must look through the lens from the opposite side. By lining up our eyes with the lens and the object, we can see the image, which appears to be somewhere behind the lens from our perspective. However, the image is actually focused between f1 and the vertex of the lens. The image is also upright. Notice that the image is reduced in size. The ratio of the size of the image relative to the size of the object is 1:3. Since the image is upright, the magnification will be +1:3. Since this image cannot be projected onto a reflective screen, it is a virtual image. Let's see what happens with the object closer to the lens. The object is now 15 centimeters from the lens, which puts it at f1. In this case, the image is still located between f1 and the vertex of the lens. The image is also upright and reduced in size. But the image is a little larger than it was previously. The actual magnification is +1:2. Since the image cannot be projected onto a reflective screen, it is a virtual image. Now, let's consider Galileo Galilei, a 17th century astronomer who wanted a better way to observe the sun, moon, stars, and planets. After hearing about a recent Dutch invention called a perspective glass that was supposed to magnify objects, he thought, why not build a similar apparatus for stargazing? Galileo Galilei knew that a convex lens could enlarge an image, but the image would be inverted and hard to see. He also knew a concave lens would produce a virtual image he could see, but the image would be reduced, not enlarged. Then he thought, what if I combine a convex lens with a concave lens? The convex lens would enlarge the image, and the concave lens would turn the image right side up. Remember what happens to parallel rays of light passing through a convex lens? Since the convex lens is a converging lens, the rays converge at a point close to the lens. Now, see what happens when we add a concave lens. Since the concave lens is a diverging lens, the rays diverge slightly, but then they converge again at a point farther from the lens. When Galileo combined two lenses to make a telescope, he produced an optical system. An optical system is two or more lenses, mirrors, prisms, or other optical devices working together to manipulate light for a specific purpose. His telescope was rather crude, but when he turned it toward Jupiter, he discovered 4 of Jupiter's largest moons. He also measured the height of the mountains on Earth's moon, and he was the first to observe sunspots. With the equipment we have already used in this lab, we can build our own Galilean telescope. We have placed our object at the 100 centimeter mark on the optical bench. The double-convex lens was placed at the 120 centimeter mark on the bench, and the double-concave lens was placed at the 140 centimeter mark on the bench. If we line up our eyes with the lenses and the object, we see a blurry image. But by sliding the convex lens slowly forward, we bring the image into focus at the 130 centimeter mark. Notice that the image is virtual, upright, and enlarged. We have built a telescope. This particular model would not be practical for astronomy, but if the lenses were placed in a hollow tube and mounted on a stand, we could use it like Galileo Galilei did. At this time, proceed with the corresponding activities.